Okay, April, do you want to take it from here or you want me to introduce it and then you go?
I can take it from here if you want me to.
Okay, I'll introduce April. For those of you who don't know, April is the Legislation Committee Coordinator. She's also a CSC. Some of your CSC is on here. And it's just really great with legislation. There's a legislation committee. Casey is a member of the legislation committee who's also here as an author of legislation. Yeah, so April, take it from there.
Yeah, thanks. So, as Alyssa mentioned, I'm the legislative committee chairman, and essentially, it's not our job. And I think there's a lot of confusion sometimes, and people think that it is. But our job is to just make sure that the legislation looks okay, sounds okay, grammatically correct, all of that fun stuff, and it is doing what you're actually wanting to do and accomplish. And the committee reviews it, and we kind of sort it into two different categories, which we'll see: consent calendar and discussion calendar. The consent calendar is voted on as a whole, and I'm jumping ahead. It's fine. And then the discussion calendar, those items are discussed individually and voted on individually. And so that's kind of the whole point of this active legislation. Town Hall is like talk to actives about the legislation on those calendars, how it works, and then things like that. So if you want to go to the next slide. Perfect. So we'll review the consent agenda. We'll go item by item on the consent agenda, just so you know what's in the agenda. And then obviously the discussion. We'll answer any questions that you have. And then we'll also explain how it's important for you, especially to be on this call and to understand the legislation more so than anyone else. So the first one is the consent agenda. So the consent agenda comes to the delegation, the voting delegation at convention as a whole. So most of all of the legislative proposals that are on a consent agenda are simple, straightforward in nature, and then also they don't conflict with anything. They're basic stuff that everyone agree on. So most of the time it's grammatical errors and things that need to be taken out for the sake of maintaining the sorority's IRS status and just making sure that our Constitution is what we want to be considered as timeless. And by timeless, I mean we're not having to go back every single year and change it, and making sure that the terminology stays it's timeless. We don't have to change it every time we change something else. So that's what the consent agenda is for. And that's what all of these items on the consent agenda are.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here. First, I'm gonna apologize. I have a really sensitive mouse, and so it goes back and forth. I cannot put the links in the chat, so I actually can't copy and paste this and drop it in the chat. But I did just want to say it's on omegaphi-alpha.org, and if you go to convention, and then there's an option for legislation, and if you click legislation, you can see all the information about the differences between the two, as well as download the PDF that is linked here. I just can't put the link in the chat. So I just wanted to say that. And I also want to point out that it's really important that you do pull that up and read it, because the way that the committee has formatted it is such that you can view the current legislation and then view it with exactly what is proposed to change. I didn't do that here on this presentation because it's super long. So I just wanted to share that. And with that, I'll go to proposal number 1.
Yeah. So what you'll see on the actual agenda is that Casey has so graciously linked. Thank you, Casey. Is that we have exactly what it reads in the Constitution currently, what it's going to read with the change, and then kind of what it's doing. And then at the very bottom is a rationale. That rationale is what's on the screen. That way, you know, what exactly it's trying to do. So for this one, we're deleting Article 3 in its entirety and renumbering the subsequent sections so that way they're all nice, neat, and in order. This is just so
this Article 3 is national policies, just to be clear. So it would remove all national policies from the Constitution.
And it only includes, and like why it's on the consent agenda, because I know that this was what I like to call a hot button topic at convention last year, because it wasn't on the consent agenda last year. I don't think that people realize what exactly it does. And we're not getting rid of these policies. They're still there. They're just in our standard operating procedure. And that's why it's on the consent agenda this year. Is we're not completely removing them from the national organization as a whole. They're not going bye-bye. I say we, like I, wrote the legislation, but like y'all know what I mean. But it's just moving them to the standard operating procedure, so that way we can update them with the new technology that we have, and B, we can be more flexible, because if COVID taught us anything, it's that we need to be super flexible in things, and having them in our documents are not. And that's basically what the rationale is saying, is that these are unnecessary because they're just in our standard operating procedures anyway. And honestly, this is only, and in the rationale too, it mentions that it's only some of the national policies. It's not all of our national policies, like social media, privacy, accessibility, like all of that kind of stuff. It resides in like standalone documents. So that's why the committee really put it on the consent agenda, was because of that reason. So that's basically what it's doing, is it's just moving it to a different document so that it can live and breathe and change when we need it to change. So
I think we should pause here and see if anyone has any specific questions about this one, because Casey is here and is the person who wrote this and can answer. So any of you who are here, do you have questions or concerns about this item or need for clarification? Casey, anything you want to add?
I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, good. No, I don't really have anything to add. I just think it's really important to note that just what April said at the end, that Article 3 of the Constitution only includes some of our national policies for some reason, and not all of them. And it's really just best practice to keep all of these separate from the Constitution and bylaws for that flexibility as needed. So I'm just hoping that that is clear.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think probably the reason that the other policies are not in the Constitution is because they were created in a year where we weren't adding things to the Constitution, like in a non-convention year. And so like 2 years ago, I guess in 2020, that was already 2 years ago. That's when the accessibility and accommodations policy was approved. So it wasn't during a legislative review time. So it wasn't published in the Constitution. So, okay. This one, I'm sorry, I didn't really clarify. I tried to do a better job clarifying in the future ones, but I'm realizing in all of these I didn't. The deletion of this article is specifically about selective recruitment. It like describes chapters selective recruitment in some way.
Yeah, so this one's just this one, and then there's one other one that's pretty similar to it, a different clause too, I think. Same section, different clause. Just talking about like moving it, once again, it's kind of like the same thing, just a different topic, moving it from like a constitution and policy like can't necessarily be flexible to something that can be flexible. So that way, especially with like topics like alcohol and drug policy and like selective recruitment, those things need to be able to be changed. And so that's why this is another one of the reason why I feel like I have to justify why we put things on the consent agenda. But like that's why we put it on the consent agenda, was just to make sure that like we as a sorority can adapt to everything and like be the best in the exact moment that we need it to be. So that's another one.
Yeah, and I think it actually says like in this section that like the information will be provided in a procedure, but like that's not really necessary because the procedure already exists. So this is more of like a clarification of the Constitution, is that there is a procedure, and so we only need the procedure. Okay, so I tried to do a better job here. This is what this one is: to remove all mention of specific positions that make up the operational leadership team.
And this is just another one that is just moving it, like, there's no need to get, this is one of those, and the reason why it's on the consent calendar is this is one of those that makes the Constitution like timeless. So like while we can change what we like call ourselves on the OLT and things like that, we still have to like stick to certain things because of the Constitution. And that's not necessarily always the best way to do it now, like because of just the way the world works anymore. And so like moving it, like completely removing all mentions of specific positions gives it that timeless ability to not have to be amended every single time we have to get together. I mean, obviously there's going to be amendments every single time because it's a large document, but like this is just one thing that doesn't have to be changed when we decide to call something else, like call someone something else. If in the future we don't like the term like CSC or CHS, like we don't have to stick with that. We can change it. And, you know, to better the chapters and to better the sorority as a whole. And so that's one of those, another one that's similar, and you'll see that with the consent agenda. They're all pretty similar, and the rationales that we have, like that the authors provided to us, and that we as a committee said and felt like, yes, this deserves to be on the consent agenda. 90% of it is just to make the Constitution timeless, if not 95%, like just to make the Constitution timeless. So that way we can better serve everyone in the sorority, not just active, not just alum, but everyone as a whole. So
yeah, so I'm happy to answer questions about this if there are any. There's not a representative from the board on the call, but the board of directors submitted this proposal, as April said, just for clarification's sake. So it does change two big things. It changes the positions that are named in the Constitution, just because we as an organization have found the need to have some flexibility in what those positions are. Again, like through COVID, we were like, I don't know what this position does. Why do we have this? Why do we have to have this? And there was a lot of pressure to fill these positions that like weren't actually necessary or needed. And then some of them were elected and some of them were appointed, which was also super confusing. So it just changes them all to be appointed instead of elected. So there will be no more elections if this passes for members of the operational leadership team, but the board of directors will still be elected, and that is clarified in a different proposal. So I'm going to pause and ask if anyone has any specific questions about this proposal that I can answer. Yes, you can definitely unmute to ask your question. This is a forum for you. So yes, please ask.
So just to clarify, it would remove like an election. So at the next convention, the voting delegates would have like less elections to vote for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I understand what you're asking, but these positions were the ones that were elected at district summit and not at convention. So these are the director positions, like Cardinal Principals Director, Alumni Membership Director, Expansions Director, Collegiate Membership Director, like those were elected. But to be frank, I think in the last they became elected positions in 2017. And I don't actually think there was ever a contested election. So there was only one person running in each position. So we still had to hold elections for that. And I think it was a little confusing to chapters, like what are these people that we're electing virtually, kind of. So delegates at convention would still elect the board of directors. So yes, the board of directors will still be elected at convention. That's what's traditionally elected at convention. Does that help?
Yeah, that was super helpful. And you actually answered my follow-up question too. So thank you very much.
Yeah, perfect. And I think the next one is about the board of directors, so we can clarify that too. April, is it okay if I just jump into this?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this one is clarifying that alumni can run for a position on the board of directors. So previously it said national office, which is kind of confusing. Like, what is national office? So the board submitted this proposal clarifying that national office is the board of directors. And it also clarifies when members of the board of directors will be elected. So they will be elected at the biennial national convention. And it removes the whole thing about election of the operational leadership team, because like I said, some of those were elected positions and some are appointed. It says like it says currently the slate for these officers will be presented at even year district summits. And so that also was confusing because we were having district summit every year, and like we didn't have them this year, so we didn't have elections this year. So it's all a little confusing. So like deleting all of that, but adding to like the one part that's being added or kept but moved up is members of the board of directors are elected at the biennial national convention. It does say in our current constitution that the elected at the biennial national conventions held in the odd number years, but this is 2022, which is an even numbered year, and we are having a convention this year, and it is not a year to elect board of director members because they were elected in the odd number year convention last year. So we're just changing it where conventions are going to move to even numbered years because our organization cannot support the financial demand of back-to-back event years, and a lot of our chapters can't support that either with delegates. So we're just removing the mention to the odd and even numbered years. So again, flexibility, making it a little bit more timeless. Yeah, this really came out of COVID because we were supposed to have an in-person convention in 2021 and we couldn't. Any questions about this? Okay. Another one by the board of directors is removing committees, again, to standard operating procedures, moving them from the constitution and bylaws to the standard operating procedures. And some of the committees don't exist. So like removing the committees that don't exist and the councils that don't exist. Or if like a new council or committee is needed, that will be spelled out in the standard operating procedure for that committee. This is super similar to the policies that the proposal from Casey about policies, because we have standard operating procedures for like elections committee, legislation committee, and we have a lot of standard operating procedures, but not for all of them. So the board just decided that like all of this should move to the standard operating procedures. Like there's no sense in it being in the Constitution. I'm sure some of you are not even really sure what the committees are or what they do, and we don't either. So that's why we're going to remove them. Any questions about this one? Okay. Do you want me to talk about this one, or you want to share about why this is on the consent?
I don't care either way.
Go ahead.
But
go ahead.
Okay. So this one is one of those that popped up after, like, we had to look at this one towards the end. So what happened was, and Alyssa can talk more to like the specifics, but essentially alumni associations were dissolved like 20-ish years ago. That was pre-April. So they formed a process for creating alumni chapters, which is what like Omega Iota, Omega Delta, those, when you think of, that's an alumni chapter. They didn't, though, the sorority didn't complete the steps that needed to ensure that they report all activity under their group tax exemption. So our alum chapters right now are not in compliance with IRS regulations regarding all of the taxi accountancy information with the sorority as a whole. And so that's why like it would be a lot to make alumni chapters like formalized and like you know, recognized by the sorority and things like that. It would just take a whole lot on alumni chapters. And I was previously an alumni chapter coordinator, and I can tell you that all of the things that would be required of them, maybe one of them could do. So honestly, what's like, if only one chapter can do it, then what's the point of keeping them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that's why the board felt like, and Alyssa can talk to this too, like it's much more important that we like keep our sorority as a whole and like make sure that our nationals is good, not only for our actives, but for our alumni, because if we don't have active chapters, we don't have alumni, we don't have a national organization, then what are we doing all of this for? And so because of all of that, that's why they're deleting that specific article, which deals like solely with alum chapters. So that's why we, and as the committee, because I know this one has already been a hot button topic, more with alumni than actives, because y'all aren't quite there yet. You will be one day, but not yet. Is the reason why we put it on the consent agenda is because it's important that we keep like above board with the IRS because they're kind of important. So, you know, that's why it's on the consent agenda. And Alyssa, I'm sure, could tell you like way more about it, but that's the basics. At least dumbed down for April. That was the basics that I said in my head.
No, that is the basics. That's good. Yeah. So, and some backstory for those of you who haven't been around for a long time. So Omega Phi Alpha used to have alumni association. So there was like the Greater Nashville Area Alumni Association. And that was until like 1999. And they dissolved the alumni associations, which you did have to pay dues for. It's really complicated. We don't have to get into all that. Essentially, the short version is you had to join within 6 months of graduating. And if you didn't join, you were not considered a lifetime member of Omega Phi Alpha. And so around 1999, 2000 is when we decided that all members who join in college are lifetime members. There should not be like a financial requirement as soon as you graduate to be a lifetime member, and there shouldn't be like a time-bound requirement for that. So it was at that point that we started brainstorming what to do next. And so throughout the early 2000s, there was a lot of conversation about what we would do. And there was some like casual alumni groups, if you will. And then we started to form a process for making those more official. But as this says, we never followed through with those steps. And so one of the questions that we've been getting is like, if we knew this wasn't in line with our group exemptions, why now? So I can say personally that the first time I heard about this was in 2019. And at that point, we started really working to determine what the next step should be. But as with anything like this in an organization, it takes a lot of time. And we considered a lot of options, like we say in this rationale, but essentially forming alumni chapters would be mimicking them to active chapters. And the, somewhat harsh and disappointing reality of life in an organization is that a lot of alumni take time off, like right after they graduate. So it's pretty normal that there's like a 2 to 5 year gap from active life to alum involvement. And we just lose so many people in that time period who are familiar with the structure of an active chapter. And as a former alumni chapter coordinator who passed the torch to April, it's a really, really hard to get people. It's hard to get people to show up. So like electing officers, having bank accounts, like having meeting and service hour requirements and collecting dues is like beyond, it's just impossible. And we've just heard time and time again from our alumni members that they're not interested in paying dues. They just want to get together and socialize. So we feel like this is the best happy medium, is that we will encourage people to engage, network, participate in sisterhood and service through regions. We are going to do like a much smaller regions are going to be announced at convention. So instead of 4 regions, I think there's 7. which will make it more conducive to gathering. So
I also want to say that like this is not saying that like once you graduate, like, and now that there should this pass, there wouldn't be any alum chapters. Like you can still get together with the people who would be in those alum chapters anyway. So it's not like we're saying, oh, you can't even meet and get together. This is just saying, hey, you can't call yourself. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like
I think
you can't call yourself an alum chapter. You can still go, you know, do whatever. You just can't, you know, call yourself.
You can't, you can't say that you're like acting on behalf of Omega Phi Alpha as a chapter. So for those of you who are on the call from Phi chapter, you probably know that the Omega Iota is like a massive alumni chapter. It's our largest one. It's our most active. And it's a bummer because they've done so much work and have like, that's the only one that we think would actually formalize and follow through. So I know that Omega Iota does a lot of things, a lot of service projects. They often do senior ceremonies for graduating members. All of that can continue. So we are not at all saying that the people who are organizing Omega Iota can't continue to do that. They just can't do it as an alumni chapter. So it could just be the Phoenix area alumni, but it can't be Omega Iota anymore. So I'll pause and for questions if you guys have them.
I have a question. So I'm actually Phi Chapter's alumni liaison to Omega Iota. And so would that mean that like what would they call themselves? Like, I just, that kind of seems pretty like hazy to me, I guess. Do you have like clarification on that?
Like what would Omega Iota call themselves? I think just like the Phoenix area alumni, you know, that's how we've done it in the past. So I think it would just be like the Phoenix area alumni of Omega Phi Alpha.
And to speak to Omega Delta, we'd probably go with the direction of like Mid-South because ours just doesn't encompass Nashville. Like I don't live in Nashville. I live about 40 minutes south of Nashville. And so most of ours do as well. Like they're all within a 2-hour drive of Nashville, but they're not in Nashville. And so we would just be like the Mid-South alumni, you know, whatever, not necessarily Nashville specific.
Yeah.
So that could be the case too with other ones, like the one down in Houston might be called something else. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, that would just be up to them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for pointing that out, April. So I think Arizona is going to be in the West region. And Texas is going to be in a different region. So like right now, Texas is in the West region, but Texas is going to be in a different region. So the concentrations of alumni are different. The West region is our largest region. It's the most spread out, but the majority of the alumni live in Arizona, or I think the next highest number is like maybe in Colorado. But this would like really encourage regional gatherings, like April is saying. The Mid-South encompasses a few other states, so we could really encourage like multiple people in any city in the region to have alumni gatherings. I know Omega Iota is Phoenix based, but like if there are still people that are in Flagstaff, they could have their own, you know, alumni association or just regional alumni gatherings. So yeah, it's like twofold, like the IRS regulations, but also we just like don't think that we should be requiring anything of these groups of people, and that they can just get together the way they want to get together. Yeah, of course. This one is elections of directors again. So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time here. It's just clarifying that it currently says officers elected in district summits take office by July 1st. But if we're not having, well, like this year, we don't have district summits, so we can't elect officers. And also this reflects the constitutional proposal, which is to not elect operational leadership team directors.
Yeah, because now we've on the consent agenda and the discussion agenda, and I didn't mention this before, and that's totally my bad, but we have constitutional proposals and then bylaw proposals. And then obviously that's self-explanatory of all of those we're dealing with the Constitution and articles and sections and clauses in the Constitution. Now, this one and then the rest of them on the agenda talk specifically about the bylaws. So this is not Article, I think it's 4 in the Constitution. This is Article 4 in the bylaws. So just FYI.
This is related to the constitutional revision that we just talked about committees and councils. It would just clarify that if they're not in the Constitution, they're also not in the bylaws.
No worries, Emily.
I'll talk about this one. I think you guys might have questions about this. This pertains to actives. This is probably on the consent agenda, the item that pertains the most to active members. So you may or may not remember, but we did a member engagement survey last year in October, and we asked a lot of questions about District Summit, and then we did a separate District Summit survey. And so there are a lot of there's a lot of information. So essentially, you know, there's like this qualifying information. So to qualify as a District Summit, there's 4 things that you have to do: a module from the Leadership Development Program, a sisterhood activity, a service project, and you have to get your District Summit date and location approved. And then there's like all this other information that's like very muddy, and like, why does it even matter? So the proposed amendment is that it would say this instead. It would say a District Summit is an event that encourages members of collegiate chapters assigned to the same district and alumni living in that district to come together and bond through service, sisterhood, and leadership. Details of the District Summit, including requirements and expectations, can be found in the standard operating procedures. So again, with the standard operating procedures, it removes all the qualification of District Summit, and it just like, this just gives a lot of flexibility so we can continue the conversation about District Summit. Like, what do active members want from District Summit? What is the point in planning this event? How involved do active members want to be in this, or active chapters? So we plan to hold some focus groups before next year, like before potentially the next District Summit, and to get some like more in-depth feedback about the future of District Summits. So moving this to a standard operating procedure would allow us to create some flexibility. We also kind of found ourselves like in a little bit of a bind when we were supposed to have a District Summit this year, but COVID was still raging at the time that it would need to be planned. And we were like, what do we do? The overwhelming feedback was that you all did not appreciate virtual District Summits. So we did not feel like we should force you to do another virtual District Summit. So essentially, it seems that a lot of members have a lot of thoughts on how the future of District Summit should be. So we would really just like the opportunity to investigate this more and create a standard operating procedure for this and not have it in the Constitution or bylaws. Questions? I'm not really sure that anyone really misses District Summit, but if you do, you can voice that. We do have one district that's holding a District Summit this year on their own, which I think is great. They are chapters that are really, really close together, like distance-wise, they're like 30 minutes apart. So it makes sense for them to do it. It's great that they want to, but and maybe one other district is doing one, but yeah. Okay, this is Summers. I know she's been hanging on to be here to talk about this. So Summer, I don't know if you want to explain what this is or want us to give an overview, and then you can share more.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. So my name is Summer Ray, and I am the expansions director. So I work with all of our lovely prospective new chapters. But this does remove, so currently, as an interest group, before we move into being a prospective new chapter, we do accept a fee from each member, which is a $75 fee. And we do not have a process in place to collect dues waivers for this because it's not technically a due. It is just a fee to help them pay for the expansions process and also to help pay for their retreat, pay for their induction ceremony, and some little needed items along the way. So currently, this is just helping to remove the expansions fee from the waivers, from the list of waivers in the Constitution. So that way it would only be the active new member waivers instead of the expansions waiver. So this just explains what the expansions fee pays for and why we need this money, because currently we do not have it in our budget to pay for all of the new members and their fees through the process. So the fees pay for the new member pins, the active pins, their certificates, anything for their induction ceremony that they might need. And it's really important that we receive the $75 fee. Alyssa, do you have anything to add for that?
The only thing that I would add is that many moons ago, like in our last big expansions phase, we did allow expansions waivers. And Summer is a founding member. I'm a founding member. I think 3 members of the board of directors or 4 are founding members of chapters. And the general consensus is that people who we have granted waivers to, they don't actually activate as members of Omega Phi Alpha. So there's also, beyond like having to pay for those items, which is extremely important, it's also like just a little bit of skin in the game in terms of like the process. Yeah, every time we've ever granted waivers, they don't activate. And I just want to, the only other thing I want to add is that we do allow a payment plan. So that is something that we offer, is like they can split the fee in half and pay it like over a month period. Or depending on like when they start, we're flexible. We're happy to do in fact, we're happy to do payment plans for anyone, but we do have a couple of prospective new members who are doing a payment plan. So I just wanted to share that we are flexible and we'll work with people individually, but we have just found in the past that like people don't actually activate if we waive the fee. Any questions you guys have for Summer about this? Sounds like there are no questions. So Summer, thank you for staying on. I know you have an expansions call, but thanks for staying on to chat about it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, bye. I don't know. I can't remember what this one is. I can pull it up.
This one is just getting rid of alumni chapters in the bylaws. So like I mentioned before, we have the constitutional proposals and we have the bylaw proposals. And a lot of the bylaw proposals you'll see in not only the consent agenda, but also the discussion agenda. They're basically the same thing. They just deal with different documents. So this is another one that's the exact same thing, just taking it out of the bylaws, because we can't put constitutional amendments and bylaw amendments together in one proposal. They have to be separate. And so this is the same rationale, the same thing as the alumni chapters due to IRS as the last one was. So that's all it is.
Okay,
So
cool. Maybe we should stop here and just ask if you guys have any questions about the consent agenda before we move to the discussion agenda.
And remember that when you vote on these, and then I'll let you ask questions, but remember when you vote on these, you'll be voting on the entire document. You won't be like the entire agenda. You're not going to be voting on like 1-5, like different ones. You'll be voting on it all together. So remember that. Questions,
all right,
comments, concerns? Okay. Now let's talk about the discussion agenda. This is discussion agenda. It's just like to tell people, just like I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill, you know, the Schoolhouse Rock song that hopefully you learned. This is the process that the bill, how he became a law. So it's just going through where you vote on it individually. And we discuss it individually, not as a whole. And then the discussion agenda can be found at the same exact place as the consent agenda on the website. It's just a different link for the exact PDF, but they're all in the convention legislation website.
Emily, I
Okay.
think this is your proposal, right?
Yes, it is Emily's.
Yes, it is.
Do you want to give an overview, or do you want me to do it and then you talk about it? Or
I guess if you want to talk about it first, then I can kind of fill in where I think is needed.
okay, awesome. So this one is, if you were at convention last year or you heard about convention last year, this is kind of similar to what happened last year, where we wanted to change sister to member and sisters to members. This is changing it from sister to sibling. So this one only addresses, and it's important to note this, it only addresses the word sister, sisters, and sisterhood. That's it. It doesn't change anything else. But the sister would be to sibling, sisters would be to siblings with an S, and then, I mean, obviously, and then sisterhood would be changed to friendship. So it's kind of cut and dry. And this, she has, this is the constitutional proposal. Later on, when we get to the bylaws, there's a bylaws proposal that does the exact same thing. So it's just literally changing every word where it says sisters in the other words to change it to sibling. So that's basically it. This was an amendment last year at convention. I have higher, like, this is a better foundation than last year, so I'm hoping it goes okay. But last year it was really like a lot of bickering, and I'm sorry, that was a bad word to use. There was a lot of discussion. And so hopefully for Emily's sake, it goes, you know, peacefully, or that's definitely not a word, but it's been a day, y'all. So I'm sure Emily wants to add more than what I said.
I mean, yeah, that was basically it. The like, sorry, I'm not remembering words very well today, but I guess like the basis behind it is just to make it more gender neutral among the chapters. I thought that sibling was better than member, just because sibling, you can still use like sister and brother and things like that, but siblings definitely a more gender neutral, especially when it comes to the overall constitution and bylaws. And then what people individually want to be referred as, they can identify as such. So I thought from like an institutional way, this would make a lot of people feel more comfortable within the sorority as a whole. So that's basically just the justification behind it.
Any questions, Carly, Andrea, even questions that you think your chapter might ask when it comes to this and voting on this at convention? Now is a good time to ask.
I just have a question about, and I don't know, you can just tell me if I can't ask this, but was members last convention, was that not approved?
It did not pass.
Okay.
Yeah, it did not pass. I think I can generally say this. I know April sort of alluded to this, but I think there's two different, like, based on our experience at convention last year, I think it is fair to say that there are sort of two different camps that people fall into, and the camp that says, no to sibling or member, or who potentially will say no to sibling, who said no to member. It's a mixed bag of people. So it's not just like, it would be easy if we were like, oh, it's just the alumni who don't want anything to change, but it actually wasn't. It was a mixed group of people. I think largely it was alumni members, but there were active chapter delegates who did not support that. It's sort of interesting because we use member a lot anyway. Like, I use member most of the time, honestly. I mean, like, if I were talking about, like April, I might be like, oh, she's my sister, my sorority. But like, if I was writing an email, I would be like, oh, a member of the sorority, like I tend to use more gender neutral terms, but there was this like very strong feeling that we are a sorority, and a lot of the input was just for like history's sake. I don't really care what it is. As I said, I use the word member mostly. But the feeling sort of was like, well, other organizations are fraternities and are co-ed and use the word brother and brotherhood. So I think that was like the biggest counter argument. April, I don't know if you have anything.
And another thing was with members specifically, not the sibling one, but I think because the sibling amendment and I think Alyssa can attest to this too. I think the sibling amendment to change it, because the original legislation said member, and then there was an amendment quite a bit of ways into the discussion that changed it to sibling. I think by that point though, so many people had like gone into the trenches for their specific side that they weren't going to hear the other side with sibling anyway. And so I think that was the problem with sibling last year, is that the amendment came in, and this happens just not only in the sorority, but it also happens like in real life politics, but people get so drawn to like one side or the other that the amendment just came too late to appease both sides. But
yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about that.
Remember, I think it was just because other organizations who weren't even like, just like, I'm trying to think of like, like
a business fraternity,
yes, or even just an organization. Like we had a coloring club at my college, like a coloring club. I was a member of that, but that's different than IA. And I think that was a lot of the problem with the word member, is that the familial ties weren't there, for lack of a better term. Because I think that like being a member in Omega Phi Alpha is completely different than being a member in the coloring club.
Right.
Just for the connection's sake. And I think that was a lot of the problem too with member. And then we just got so entrenched and it was just a hot mess, but we survived.
Yeah, like that's what I talk about like in this as well, is that it does bring more of like a family element to it, which I think is a lot deeper. And plus like the Alpha Kappa sorority at KU, we changed this last semester, and it's been easy breezy for us. And honestly, a lot of people, I think we had a lot of people in our sorority come out and say that this has helped them a lot. So it was kind of like a mini test run at our sorority, and it's done well.
Yeah, I was going to point that out, Emily. So thanks for saying that. I was recently talking to someone, this is a little off topic, but we're going to be delving into like gender and gender neutrality from a national standpoint, and like our acceptance of being gender inclusive and accepting all genders. So there's going to be like more to come. But when we were discussing this, we were talking about that, how like your chapter Alpha Kappa already does this, already calls them siblings. And that we don't like, I think that's one of the best things about OPA, is that like chapters do have the autonomy to do things like that. So yeah, I was going to point that out. So I think that's great. So, but this is on the discussion agenda because it is more of a hot topic, if you will. We've been here a few times. We also tried to do this in 2016. I think 2016, we tried to change it to members. And then I think in like 2006, we may have talked about this as well. So it's been a long standing thing, but I always encourage people, like, that doesn't discourage you from submitting legislation, because it's different people every year. So keep submitting the legislation until you get what you're going for. It's important to have people do that. And this one is the same, but is in the bylaws. So the first one was the constitutional proposal, and this is the bylaws proposal. This one.
Yeah. So this one is amending Article 3 of the bylaws to making LOAs like non-consecutive terms. So if I'm remembering correctly, and I'd have to pull pull the legislation up, but
Have it up right
essentially,
now.
okay, you might want to read how it says, and then because
Okay. It says
basic,
a member
go ahead.
may have, so what it says right now, a member may have up to 2 chapter granted leave of absence terms, period. And the proposal is that a member may have up to 2 non-consecutive chapter granted leave of absence terms. So you cannot take back-to-back semesters on leave of absence. It is my understanding that a lot of chapters already have this rule.
Yeah, and I know the author and I had talked about, I remembered the conversation, but I don't remember who authored it off the top of my head. But we had a conversation of the reason this needs to be a thing is because in whatever position they're in, they see a lot of like, if they don't come, if the LOAs, if they get 2 LOAs in a row, that's like, I don't know. Okay, we'll say spring semester and then fall semester because that's technically 2 consecutives. So if you do that, that's a whole calendar year that they're LOA and not involved. What are the honest to goodness chances that they're going to come back the next January? Very slim to none. Even if you do fall and spring consecutively, even those consecutively, what are the chances? Because then you have the summer. What are the honest to goodness chances that they're going to come back to the fall? Every person that I know of when I was an active who took 2 like consecutive back-to-backs, they didn't come back. And so that was the kind of the rationale and the conversation that the author was having of that's why we want to make it non-executive, is so that way we keep like our like retention rates are important, yes, but we keep them and make sure that they're engaged and all of that kind of stuff. And if they do, this is not, saying that they can't go early alum or anything like that if you're like student teaching or whatever, because I know a lot of OFIA members were education. So that's not saying that, it's just saying they can't take it consecutively. And so LOAs. So I think that's like, that was the rationale behind this one. We put it on the discussion agenda simply because we felt like this could potentially spark conversation. This one was, we weren't really sure. So we went ahead and put it on the discussion agenda anyway. Because
last year there was
but
last year there was a ton of conversation about LOA. So I think this is probably a good spot for it. So also I just want to say here that I had done some like data gathering about this, like with Virginia, our national office administrator. I don't have the data right in front of me, but it was like outrageous, the number of people who took back-to-back LOA terms who then disassociated. I mean, I think it was something like 85%, because you don't know anyone. Like if you think about it, you like don't know the people very well. It's like super, super rare that they come back. So which is interesting based on the leave of absence legislation that was proposed last year, because like people, it didn't pass because the goal of it was to eliminate people on LOA from being able to participate in all events of the chapter. But which is kind of funny now that like thinking about how it didn't pass, because like they're not participating anyway, or they wouldn't be taking consecutive terms and they would come back and not disassociate. So that's that one. Any questions or thoughts? I saw a lot of head shaking from Carly. Like maybe you agree that when this happens at Phi chapter, they don't come back. Yeah. And I think it's kind of frustrating. Like you guys work so hard. Like everyone, it's possible that everyone needs 1 or 2, maybe 3 LOA semesters over the course of their like 8 to 10 semesters in school. But it is kind of hard for people to take like so many LOAs. The next 2 are from Jenna about collegiate membership requirements. They're pretty straightforward, but do you want to talk about them?
Sure. So in the rationale, it's like obviously y'all already know that we require a minimum of 10 service hours for active members. That should be nothing new. This is just making it to where new members will also be required to complete 10 service hours. Honestly, I don't know of a chapter like that I've had conversation with that doesn't already have some sort of requirement for their new members. But if they don't, this would just make it to where they have to complete 10 service hours for new members. It's and like she said in her rationale, it's honestly just to make sure that they're transitioned well, they're better prepared, they know what's expected, kind of. Because I know that's a big thing of like you have a new member class that's like the size of your current your current chapter numbers, and then that's a lot of people to intake and get acclimated, a lot of people. And so this would just help them acclimate even better and easier. And like she says, and like I know like many chapters already have this is just setting a national standard for everybody, putting a nice little pretty bow on top. But once again, we put this on the discussion agenda because we're not 100% sure this won't go without some sort of, discussion, but we'd rather be safe than sorry. So that's why we put it here. But if anybody has any questions, y'all can just say, April, hang on, and then just ask, because, y'all can just interrupt me. But does anybody have any questions on this one?
And the last one is similar. So this is the last one.
Okay. So yay, we're almost done. I know this is terribly boring if you're not a legislative person, and I'm sorry. This one is just adding a requirement for new members to achieve an average of 85% on national quizzes, not the test, quizzes. And honestly, if like you can take it as many times as you need to, you can review the stuff as many times as you need to. So this should not be that hard to achieve. And this is just once again making sure that chapters understand and know about like nationals as a whole, just everything to acclimate the new members better, so that when they are active, like it's just an easier ease of transition, and ensuring that average score of 85% is just kind of, the same thing. And it says in there that like you're required obviously to accommodate learning disabilities. If you need more help, you contact the collegiate membership team. Like this is just common sense in my opinion, but we put it on the discussion agenda anyway. But do you have any questions about this one?
I just want to say that I think this is a helpful tidbit of information, is that both of these submissions were driven by information that we collected on the chapter mid-year report form. And you all are required to submit, or usually it's a membership director, when they move transition members from P&M or from new member to active, they have to enter their quiz scores and their test score. And last semester we were like, wait, why are people not getting 85 on their quizzes? And we were so confused because we thought the requirement was 85%. But then we read the Constitution and bylaws and we were like, oh, that's only on the national test. But this whole time we thought it was on both. So that was like a clarifying point. And then the same thing for the 10 service hours on the mid-year report form, you all submit your active member service hour requirement and then your new member. And we started to realize that some chapters don't have any hour requirements of their new members. Some require the 10, some require 5, some require 8. It's like all over the place. And it's just like impossible for us to keep up with, to like make sure members are getting activated that do meet the requirements. So a ton of things on here, like the LOA as well, are all driven by like data and information that we gather from the reports that chapter officers submit to the national organization, which then helps drive changes that we think will be beneficial to the organization. So any questions before we close out? Even if it's like somewhat off topic from legislation or about the process of legislation or something, maybe not specific to proposals, we can answer.
I guess I kind of have one because I did not know when you said, April, that like you have to vote on the consent agenda, you have to vote on all of it at once. The decision, or yeah, that one, we can vote individually, correct? Like that's the one we
Discussion,
talked-
yeah.
Discussion one, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, they vote on, yeah, you vote on those on individually, just as like Congress does or whatever.
Like if,
Yeah.
as April was saying, if like each one was its own individual bill. So there's discussion based on parliamentary procedure that's set at convention. You know, usually we set like a time limit for discussion, and all the rules apply to each individual one.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And I'm not sure if it's on the next slide or if there's even a slide about this, but the reason why we asked y'all, and thank you to Phi Chapter and Alpha Kappa, for, you know, coming onto this is because like it's important as delegates, and even if you two aren't your chapter's delegates, that's okay, but it's important that delegates know what your active chapter thinks about this legislation. So it's important that active chapters sit down, if obviously not if every chapter sent everybody, it would be a big old, you know, but that's like, it's important for chapters to sit down and discuss with their delegates, hey, like my chapter really likes I don't know, this is just an example here, but like really likes the 10 service hour requirement for new members, but like as a chapter, we don't really like the fact that like there could be like they have to have an 85% on a quiz or whatever. And so that's why we encourage, and like we did this was so that y'all, the delegates, if you're not the delegates, that's okay, but like y'all could go back and relay it to the chapter and say, hey, this is the stuff that's being voted on. And if it does pass, like it's going to be taken effect immediately. So it would happen for fall semester. And so like that requirement of 10 service hours, then chapters can't say, well, I didn't know about that. You sent 2 delegates to convention, you should know about it. Like it's that kind of importance of, and why we do this and why we go ahead and release it so early is so that chapters can go and discuss and know what their opinions are on it, know what could potentially pass, what could not potentially pass, things like that. So that's the importance of coming tonight. So I appreciate y'all for coming and listening to me and Alyssa talk so much, because I know I can't. Alyssa's fun to listen to. I'm boring to listen to. So
yeah, that's funny, but that is a good point. Even if you're not a delegate, it's important to be here. I sent it out to everyone actually today, like all active members and new members, and invited them to come so that they could hear the legislation that was being presented like firsthand and share their opinions, and then they could go back to their chapter and share with the delegates. I know not all chapters have selected their delegates yet. So, and then we have an alumni one as well, and we do that one a little bit differently, where we break them out into regions, like the 4 current regions, and they can talk to their alumni delegates. We like have an email address for each regional delegates, because those alumni delegates in each region represent their constituents, you know, the alumni that lives in their region. So if they have like, you know, say they have 20 alumni contact them, and 19 say they don't like this X proposal, then they might feel compelled to vote no, right? Because the majority of their constituents asked them to vote no. So we arranged that separately. It's in June for alumni, but this is a great opportunity for actives to better understand. So I did record this. I'll get it uploaded to our YouTube channel so you guys can share it with your chapters. They can watch it in 1.5 times speed, you know, if they don't want to sit through the whole thing. That's me, 1.5, 2 times speed.
Yeah. Or just skip to the parts that they have questions on.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, you guys can, I think everyone is a chapter officer who's here tonight as well, some type of officer. So definitely inform your chapter members about this, and the need to be informed about legislation and why it's important. So I think that is all from us. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here and being engaged. Emily, thank you for being here to share more about your legislation as well. And if you have questions, April's email, are you putting in the chat?
Yep, that's what I was doing right now. Well, if I can type it out.
Thanks for
It's
having
based.
us.
It's just
Yeah, of course.
legislation
At
at omega-phi-alpha.org. And I'm pretty sure I just spelled legislation wrong, but it's fine. It's there.
I think, oh, I didn't read it in the chat. I was reading the closed captioning. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, guys. Have a great night. And if you
Thank
need anything,
you.
you know how to get in touch. Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you. See y'all.
Bye.
Mhm.